Let's give Tim Kurek a big round of applause as he comes to share with us this walk home.
That was it. That was my talk right there. That's all you get. So a few things really quick. I got to get used to holding this up to my face. I am absolutely blown away by this conference. I've had an incredible time. It's been so spiritually encouraging and so incredible to hear the men that have spoken today. And I'm absolutely flabbergasted that I get to be a part of it. I'm 26, obviously American. I obviously love beer and women. and I'm here speaking with Carl and Jared McKenna and Roland Croucher and Matt Glover and getting to listen to music from Tosh. And this is an absolute life-changing moment for me. So thank you guys for having me. The other thing I was going to say is, Carl, if you ever invite me back to this conference and you have him speaking, and by him I mean Roland Croucher, the doctor of everything that I don't know, please don't put me after him. He's like ridiculously intelligent, and I aspire to his prayer life. Yeah. So, and just for the record, and I said it back there earlier, I don't know how many of you caught it, but next time somebody asks you how many times you pray, just say, I pray without ceasing. I think that's the appropriate response. So, and we've heard a lot from different speakers about the walk home. We've heard about, Carl talked about the walk home being our walk towards God, and then Jared talked about heaven needing a home as well, and seeking us out as a home. And then Roland talked about these aha moments. And the aha moments, as I wrote it down, experiences that inspire a reorganization of thought. And I just wonder how many times we have those experiences and we don't pay attention to them. How many times God brings somebody into our life, allows something to happen, and we don't follow suit. We don't take it and run with it the way we need to. I will say I've been thinking and pondering the last few days about what I wanted to talk about my aspect of the walk home in relation to the journey. You know, you've seen at least the preview of, and some of you have gotten the book of. But I wanted to figure out what wouldn't be said here. First of all, I wanted to try to be original. And I realized that we talked about walk in terms of story, walk in terms of faith, walk in terms of God. We didn't necessarily talk about walk in terms of each other, in terms of the other. And it hit me, and I wrote this down, and I think it was much more succinct the way I wrote it down, so I'm just going to read this really quick. The problems that we face today as a culture and a church, the problems that are not limited to America or Australia, Europe, or the UK, have more to do with our refusal to put the other on par with our own individuality and to embrace those that come in and out of our lives with love and grace and unconditional inclusion. So, with that, I just wanted to ponder the journey, the story, and how other people factor into our lives. You know, we talk a lot about story. We hear a lot about story. Jesus uses parables throughout the Bible. He speaks in story so that we'll have at least a shot at grasping it, at getting it. And fortunately for me, not being an academic like Roland and some of the other guys here, I think story is the way that I grasp things the most clearly. And so I'm really happy he does that. It makes it possible for me to engage him in a real and practical way. And the story that obviously he's bringing us back to is the story of his son, who walked in our shoes, but also someone that was fully human at the same time that he was fully God. Somebody that needed people. So if we look at his example, we were talking earlier about the disciples. The thought occurred to me, I had another aha moment, that even Jesus traveled with people. Even Jesus needed people. As the homeless man, as the child of God, walking around doing miracles and trying to draw people to his Father. I think that is a really important thing that sometimes we miss. We also see that in the garden with Adam and Eve, that Adam was walking with God on a daily basis, and he was still lonely. He was still not fulfilled. He needed the other. So Carl talked about God being our home and the walk home being the walk towards God. I think that we need each other because while we're aliens in a strange world, God has uniquely given us the other as a piece of home while we're on that journey, something to make it easier, so to speak. Sometimes more difficult, but a lot of times easier. A little bit of background about me and how I came to some of these conclusions. Obviously, I was raised in a very strict conservative Christian home in the Bible Belt south of Nashville, Tennessee. To give you an idea about how strict my church was, I don't know how many of you guys are familiar with Jerry Falwell and the Southern Baptist Church. We thought that they were liberal. We were taught that they were liberal. So I was taught this gospel of separation. Be in the world, but not of the world. Go figure, they didn't teach us that we were still in the world, so, who would have thunk it? But we were taught to separate ourselves from everybody else that was different. If you believed the same as me, it was cool. It was safe. We could be friends. We could fellowship. We could tithe together in church. That's about it. If you didn't agree with me, my job was to either convert you at all costs, so I had brownie points, with God, to get you into church tithing as well for the big business of church, and to perpetuate that cycle of bringing people in, training them, bringing more people in. It was a whole process of behavioral modification. I was homeschooled because of that separation gospel. I was homeschooled till the 7th grade. So I learned how to read at 3.5, which is a cool thing, 3.5, 4. But I didn't have any kind of social interaction. Public school was the devil. And they didn't want us learning about evolution, the great lie of science. They didn't want us learning about anything having to do with gays or lesbians. God forbid we had a gay or lesbian teacher. And then in the 7th grade, they sent me to my first school, Franklin Classical School, which is really academically a great school, but very conservative. And then after that, as soon as my brother graduated, I've got one brother, he's 3.5 years older than me. As soon as he graduated, I was transferred to a little school called Pioneer Christian Academy in Whites Creek, Tennessee. And I graduated in a class of 10, 3 guys, 7 girls. 9 of us are still alive. And I've got an incredibly dull high school reunion to go to next year because of it. So I wonder what they're going to say. Well, think about it this way. I mean, when I, senior year, got into Liberty University, where I went to college, the year and a half that I went to college, my teachers, my classmates, and my church were so disappointed that I chose Liberty. And like I said, not because it was a very conservative school, but because of how liberal the school was and how afraid they were that I was going to become some worldly Christian. After Liberty, my parents separated and split. I came home, dropped out of school, and started supporting my mom as much as I could emotionally and financially, and decided that going back to school wasn't the right thing for me. While I was at Liberty, I encountered a group called Soul Force, started by a guy named Mel White that some of you may have heard of. He wrote Stranger at the Gate, which is a first book I ever read when I was doing research for my experiment. I met them. I had an interesting encounter with them, which you could read about in chapter 1, or chapter 0, rather. After that, when I got back home, I got back involved in church. This time it wasn't the conservative Christian church that I had been raised in. That was too far away. I didn't want to drive. I was lazy, so I went to the one down the street, which is a non-denom church, and I ended up becoming a college pastor of that church. College coordinator, because I wasn't on salary. They wouldn't call anybody a pastor that wasn't being paid. And that was the church that I really came into my own on in my conservative faith. I loved bringing people to church, and I loved changing them at all costs. My homophobia and my bigotry were everything short of violent from my teenage years on. So much so that when my close friend Will came out of the closet, his mother called me and said, "Tim, you're the only person that can do this. He needs you. Help change him. Help him help bring him back to Christ. Of course, that gave me a big head. I thought, oh yeah, I'm the only one. I can do this. I harassed him for the next 2 months, calling him multiple times a day, leaving messages, and thank God he never answered. He'd actually ended up becoming one of my best friends during my experiment. So after that situation, after that background, I find myself pacing back and forth outside in a parking lot behind a dive bar called Springwater in Nashville, going to karaoke. My friend invited me, and I was pacing because he had told me just a few seconds before that I had never done karaoke or never seen karaoke until I had seen a 300-pound bull dyke singing Muskrat Love to her partner. And at the sound, dyke, what? To her partner, what? And he said, oh yeah, did I forget to tell you? We call this lesbioke because of the massive gay population. And what I found when I walked in those doors was about 18 people within 5 minutes that instantly greeted me, hugged me, loved me, and fed into my life in a way that left me completely shocked. Now, I thought that changed me. I started going there very religiously because I did everything religiously. And I started going there every Tuesday night like clockwork. And I thought that was changing me. I thought I was getting kind of coming to my own with outside of the church. Until Liz. She pulled me outside and she asked me, how could you be a Christian? I didn't know anything, know how to respond, know what she was going to say. And that's when she told me she came out. Long story short, obviously you saw that. She was kicked out of her home. And my response to her was silence. And I ignored her. I was thinking while she was crying on my shoulder, go get your Bible. There are 6 verses in the Bible you can explain to her. Oh God, I was so mad at her parents. I thought, why couldn't they have explained to her that she was an abomination without making her feel like an abomination? That's what I would have done. So I went through this experience, and as soon as she left, I had my first major spiritual aha moment. When I got saved, I consider that to be as authentic as it got, even though I was taught really bad religion afterwards. This was the next time that God really talked to me and jarred me and shook me. And he told me that I had been using my Bible as a weapon all of my faith life. And that just like police officers who are training and carry mace and carry tasers, and they have to be tased and maced by their own weapons, it was my turn. He told me that I needed to be on the receiving end of a beating of my own faith. And that scared the crap out of me, to say nothing else. So fast forward a few years, or a few months, because I want you guys to I don't want to just tell you the whole story of the book. I want to actually share some things on my heart with you. I became very acclimated to the LGBT community. I was a bear cub, so I think most of you guys, if not all of you guys, know what that is. Big, burly, hairy gay men. They adopted me into their tribe. I wore their dog tags. I paid the dues. I went to bear events, and I was a staple of that little mini community. I was a barista at an LGBT cafe attached to an LGBT bookstore. I protested in New York with Soul Force. Mel White very graciously called me and asked me to come to New York City and protest at the Vatican's embassy down there, which I didn't even know the Vatican had an embassy. I played on a gay softball team where I thought stereotypically that because I was straight and had played baseball, it was going to be totally unfair. The entire other team could just play me and I would beat them. I was straight, there's no way. And what I didn't realize was that I was going to be watching ESPN highlight reel caliber, performances by everybody on the team, and I was going to be the absolute worst, most unathletic player out there. I attended gay church occasionally, even though I was a little bit soured on church. I spent 3, 4, 5 nights a week in the gay bars around my home. Ironically enough, our neighborhood, everybody else has gay districts. I assume Oxford is the gay district here. Capitol Hill in Seattle, where I'm from, is Nashville's is so tiny. It's a string of about 4 or 5 businesses. We call it a gayborhood. I would go out to the bars, go out to the dance clubs, spend as much time there as I possibly could as well. I wanted to immerse myself and have the other around me as much as possible. I also, incidentally, had a fake boyfriend. I decided early on that I realized early on that I was a bull in a china shop. I didn't want to hurt anybody and make anybody feel taken advantage of. I didn't want anybody to develop feelings for me and then me come out and say, hey, listen, I'm not gay, and have them feel like a fool because they invested their hearts in me like that. So I picked the biggest, blackest, burliest gay man I could find, and Sean, who is still to this day one of my closest friends, and I asked him to be my big daddy. He amicably agreed. I did all of this, and I spent all this time and immersed myself in the community, and my comfort zone completely switched from the pew to the bar stool, from the pew to the cafe, from the pew to the softball field, from the pew to the Vatican's embassy outside the U.S., or the U.S. embassy, Vatican, whatever, you know what I'm saying. And then something really, really messed up happened. I decided I was going to go back and visit a church. Not the churches I'd been raised in, because I didn't want to start or incite false drama or try to create anything, any content for anything that I was going to be writing at this point. I went to this mega church, which I love when Roland was talking, the first mega church in Australia when it reached 1,000 people. In the South, where I'm from, that's about a medium-sized congregation. The church that I went to had 5,000 people over 5 satellite campuses and 7 services a day between all of them, where the pastor would be broadcast to the other groups. So Hillsong, basically. And I went and walked into this church very apprehensively, and I didn't know why. I had visited this church several times when I was a college pastor. I had gone and counseled with this pastor. I knew he would know me, but there were 5,000 other faces in the crowd. It wasn't gonna hinder me. I wasn't gonna be noticed. I was just gonna go in, do my thing, and get out. And then I walk in and I see people, and they're dressed in their church clothes. The pastor in his Abercrombie and Fitch outfit with his 10 gallons of hair product in his hair, his Starbucks in his hand, and his iPhone, with the Bible on it. The quintessential Southern non-denom megachurch pastor, exactly like Roland when he was a megachurch pastor. Exactly, to a T. I think he copied you. And I found myself instantaneously thinking, if he says anything about tithing, if he says anything about sexual orientation, if he says anything about politics, I'm going to stand up and I'm going to walk out. Screw him. And then the band got up and started playing, and I started thinking, oh my gosh, why won't he just come out already? He looks gay. He looks like he could be down. He should be in drag. He has the figure for it. Come on, let's do this. And then the pastor gets up and starts speaking, and my thought is, oh, he better not talk about this. He better not talk about that. I was so angry at these people. So angry. And I remember having this other aha moment while I was sitting there, where I said, I was just having this dialogue. In the book, I call it my inner Pharisee. This 20-plus years of religious programming inside of me, this theological beast I had been trained to be. This Mark Driscoll had nothing on my Pharisee. I would challenge my Pharisee in a cage match with Mark Driscoll. It'd be over in 5 seconds. I started having this dialogue with my inner Pharisee, and I was just thinking, I hate these people. I want them to say something wrong. I want to make a scene. I want to leave. They've hurt me. They've hurt my friends. And it hit me. I hadn't conquered or dealt with any of the prejudice that I had inside of me prior to starting this year. I had just reacclimated and changed my comfort zone from this community to this community. I had gone from one side to the other. And at that point, God just hit me so square in the jaw. I couldn't move. I could hardly breathe. I had to get up and leave. And I think that happened for a lot of reasons. It wasn't that I wanted to hate them. It wasn't that it wasn't the same kind of prejudice. It was a prejudice motivated by the pain that I had been feeling for 6 months, 7 months up to this point, and the pain that I had heard all these beautiful people in the community that I'd become friends with, their pain, their stories, with some of these people in this audience and in this congregation. But it was still prejudice. And then I started going. I finally got back into the Word and started really praying about why it was that I felt the need to have prejudice at all, or why it is that my natural inclination was to separate myself and shun somebody that was different from me, even if only for a year. And to the church community specifically, I opened the Bible, and I go figure, I'm kind of a narcissist, I guess, take after my father. I went to 1 Timothy because I had remembered this passage. Put this up here really quick. And this passage absolutely rocked me. It was equivalent to the Father, forgive them for they know not what they do. Jesus on the cross. All right, let's see if in my tiny Bible, which is brand new. Here we go. First letter of Paul to Timothy. Okay, so Paul is obviously allegedly talking to Timothy here, talking about the false teachers. He says, some people have deviated from these and turned to meaningless talk, desiring to be teachers of the law without understanding either what they're saying or why they are saying the things about which they're making assertions. Before that it says, but the aim of such instruction, the aim of our charge in other translations, is love that comes from a pure heart, a good conscience, and a sincere faith. And that verse gave me a lot of peace because I feel like I was basically able to give them a pass in ignorance. I had experienced all these different things they hadn't yet. And so then I started thinking, what should my response be to the other? And is there a historical precedent in my religion for these things? And I realized that in the last 100 years, 113 years, I guess, we've gone through these major shifts. The civil rights movement, Jerry Falwell, when I was at Liberty, talked about the guy that used to shine his shoes and how Jerry had been a segregationist after he'd even started his Thomas Road Baptist Church. But the segregation, the biblical justification for keeping this group of people away from this group of people, treating this group of people as lesser than this group of people. John Howard Griffin in 1959, 1960 actually went down and documented this, very similar to what I did. He underwent a dermatological skin procedure and turned his skin black and cropped his hair so he could go down to the Jim Crow South and see what it was like to live as a second-class citizen. Black Like Me. It's an amazing book. But so then we go from the African American community. They get their rights. It becomes socially unacceptable for us to discriminate against them. So we allow ourselves to be forced forward to progress. And then we change the object of our prejudice. We go from them to the Jews and the Catholics. More notably, like with the Catholics, I remember when reading about JFK when he was running for president. A lot of the conservative Christians, were up in arms about him running for president, as potentially having a president that would be answering to the Pope. Obviously, he won, and they saw that there was nothing to be afraid of. So that was we were pushed forward even more. Few steps later, we get to divorce. Now, I didn't find out until I was 18 years old that my dad had been married prior to my mom, and he hid it from us, and he hid it from the church. He wouldn't have been allowed to be an elder at the church we were at if they had known that he had been he was a divorcee. Once churches realized that 50+% of their congregations were getting divorced, and that if they alienated the divorcees in the audience, they wouldn't be getting, they would lose 50% of their tithes. They had to move forward with that as well. And then they switched it to the LGBT community, and I think what we're seeing right now is another shift in that. So there's this cycle of instead of conquering and dealing and overcoming and healing from our prejudice, there's this cycle of moving and shifting it to another group. And I did the same thing, obviously switching it from the LGBT community back onto the Christian community. And then I met a man who became my hero, named Desmond Tutu. Little South African man, instrumental in ending apartheid. You listen to him talk. It's like listening, and this is a horrible reference, kind of like listening to Rafiki from The Lion King. Very wise, but very goofy. And he spoke the word Ubuntu into my life. I feel joy at the word Ubuntu. The most literal translation for Ubuntu that we could understand is, I am because you are. A person is a person because of persons. That this idea that the westernized religious and political and social individuality that we perpetuate, that we foster, is taking us off course. It's hindering our walk home. That we're part of a collective. We're bundled, that God created us to be in community with the other, to know the other, and to learn from the other. And the more that I'm me, the more you can be you. And that journey of Ubuntu began at that point in my experiment. I have been listening to all of these talks, and I've realized that that my walk home really doesn't mean anything unless you guys are walking home too, unless I'm acknowledging and respecting and affirming that walk. My walk is Jared's walk, is Carl's walk, is Tasha's walk, is Roland's walk. Without their walks, I can't have a walk. And as I said before, God gave us each other, God gave us the other in order to really know him and experience home while we're on that path to home. A few things really quick about that. Ubuntu leaves no room for labels. Labels are the enemy. My mom, at the end of my experiment, at the beginning of my experiment, the day that I came out, she wrote in her journal that she would rather have found out that she had terminal cancer and 3 months to live than find out I was gay. Flash forward to the end of the experiment. She's an ally of the LGBT community, and she tells me, after she knew about my experiment, she said, I don't feel like Satan is just the father of lies. I feel like he's also the father of labels. Ubuntu is no respecter of labels. As Tutu says, Ubuntu, Ubuntu, Ubuntu. He goes nuts with it. There's no room for prejudice in Ubuntu. Tutu says, when you dehumanize another, whether you like it or not, inexorably you yourself are dehumanized. Now, the unfun part of this talk, the more awkward thing for me, standing in front of a group of peers, and a lot of LGBT folk who have suffered things that I couldn't dream of going through. Nonviolence and Ubuntu teaches reconciliation and a desire for peace. We have these people shouting at us, tweeting at us, talk radioing us, telling us that we're heretics, apostates, abominable, telling us all these horrible things. And our response is the response that Jesus gave to us as an example. I've been reading the Gospels lately. I think I didn't ever get enough of the Gospels when I was growing up. I think if I had, I wouldn't have been able to stomach the stuff that I was learning. But I wanted to talk or read. Let's not go Matthew. It's Luke. Here we go. I'm using childhood pictures to hold this. Okay, so Judas has betrayed Jesus. He's gone and brought the mob to him. Luke 22, here we go. While he was still speaking, suddenly a crowd came, and one called Judas, one of the 12, was leading them. He approached Jesus to kiss him, but Jesus said to him, "Judas, is it with a kiss that you are betraying the Son of Man?" When those who were around him saw that he was coming, they asked, "Lord, should we strike with the sword?" Then one of them struck the slave of the high priest and cut off his right ear. But Jesus said, "No more of this," and he touched his ear and healed him. Now in Luke, as opposed to Matthew, Mark, and John, this is the only gospel where Jesus actually heals the slave's ear. In another chapter, in all the other chapters, Judas comes up and says, "I'll point out who he is." And Jesus' response to Judas is, "Friend, I know what you're doing. I call BS." Jesus' response in the gospel is first to respond with a word that I wouldn't use in that situation for somebody who's betraying me, friend. And then to the mob that's coming to take him away, and he knows exactly what's going to happen to him, is to heal the slave of the high priest who had just had his ear cut off. Jesus was the oppressed. This mob were the oppressors. And his response was peaceful. And his response was conciliatory, or what's the word? I just had it and lost it. Jesus' response was to further the message he had been speaking throughout his entire walk, his entire journey, which is love your neighbor as yourself, love the Lord thy God with all your heart, soul, and mind. He gave us that example even to the point right before he gets arrested and brutally executed. So my challenge with this, my thought for the walk home, we're all on this journey and it's not easy. It sucks. There's no other way to put it. It sucks. I'm a 26-year-old kid from Nashville. All right, I live in the Pacific Northwest now, thank God. The beer's amazing. But I'm a 26-year-old kid, college dropout. I wrote a book. That's why I'm here. Thank God he gave me this amazing ministry, because I wouldn't have been able to meet any of you guys or experience any of this amazing place had he not given me this message. This conversation that we're having right now culturally and as a church is not an easy conversation. Sexual orientation, this is your identity, this is who you are, this is who you were created to be. I have no problem saying that. There are other people who talk about bridge building that won't come out and say anything, but this is who you were created to be. Faith, Christianity, our relationship to God, that is another huge part of our identity. So what you have are two people, and a lot of times people having both, where we understand that faith and homosexuality are not mutually exclusive terms. You can be both. This side doesn't see that yet. They will. Whether we have to wait for them to die out, as Carl said. I think that'd be easier, but it's going to take a lot more time, and I'm a pretty impatient dude. We're both passionately struggling on this issue. There's nobody who just has a lax, blasé attitude about it, because to everybody who's involved in the conversation, they're passionate about it. Either I'm passionately this way and I deserve equal rights, or I'm passionately a Christian and I believe that this is an abominable thing and that true marriage is between a man and a woman. there's no room for violence, whether that be in our words or our actions or our attitudes towards each other. And Desmond Tutu was able to help end apartheid by teaching the oppressed to look at their oppressor and to see the imago Dei, the image of God in them. And in so doing, they were given a freedom from that pain. Now, there's a difference. I do want to say that I'm not saying if you've been brutally hurt, go back to the people who have brutally hurt you and put yourself around them and get hurt again. But there's a difference between protecting ourselves and shunning the other. And there's a difference between protecting ourselves and allowing ourselves to be bitter and let that bitterness grow and foster into something much more nasty that's going to affect a lot more things in our life. I've been verbally attacked more in the last 3 months than I ever thought I would, and I still know it's nothing compared to what a lot of you guys have gone through. So I want that to be known first off. Second off, really quick, before I say anything else, I wrote this book. I went through this experience. I never would say in a million years I know what it's like to be gay or consider myself an expert. I also hate the fact that I've got a voice, the fact that people won't listen to you guys who are the experts of your own lives. They have to listen to a straight person talking about your lives. So I'm sorry that we're not at the point where you guys can speak for yourselves to everybody. That breaks my heart. I shouldn't be relevant. But I have been through, in the last few months, I've been through just a little bit of what you guys have been through. Threats of violence, people telling me I'm going to hell, people telling me that by condoning a sinful lifestyle that I'm just as guilty. People that telling me that by lying and saying that I was gay when I'm not, that makes me just as much of an abomination as any of you guys for being gay. I refer them to the story of Rahab in the Bible whenever that happens. It's really funny. I was on I'm going to go all Jay Baker on you and just be rabbit trail after rabbit trail here because there's no point in trying to go linear anymore. I was on a radio show with a conservative talk show host, and it was an hour-long show, and I started in the back room, and my friends, the Outlaw Preachers down in Memphis, you'll hear more about them. Jay and me and a few other people started this group that's now like 1,200 people in the U.S. And we're basically all people from different denominations and different faith backgrounds that have been ousted and kicked out of our denominations for being affirming and for being pursuers of grace as opposed to pursuers of the law. Anyway, so they're all in a room, and I'm in this back room, and they hear my voice progressively getting louder and louder because there's 7 phone callers that have all apparently been screened to attack me. And I had a man on the phone who, I'm telling you this story not to make myself sound like a combative person, but to say that you really can use the Bible to justify anything here. An old African-American gentleman on the phone who said, your caller or your guest needs to understand that what the Bible says about homosexuality is very clear-cut. It's right there. You can read it. There's no twisting it. He needs to repent and yada, yada, yada. And my response was, your caller needs to read the Bible and understand that I could use the Bible to justify owning him as a slave, and I want to know what he thinks about that. The radio show host cut the caller off and went to the next person, but go figure. I couldn't help it. Sometimes it's hard not to get mad, though. We see these things. We see the bobcatters, and we hear what they have to say, and we get angry. We hear what Mark Driscoll has to say, and we get angry. We hear what certain people at Hillsong say, and we have to get angry. The fact that you're not singing and leading at Hillsong, that's what's an abomination to me, just so you know, because I think you're an angel. We get angry at these things, and it's okay to be angry, but our response from that anger can't be a bitter spirit or a fostered hatred, because what does that make us? That makes us guilty of the exact same things that we're calling them out for or want to call them out for. There's homophobia and there's heterophobia. I've experienced both. I mean, I almost killed the dude who first called me faggot. I had to be held back by other members of my softball team in order not to rush down there and show him who was gay or beat him up. But it was funny, my friend Rourke, who held me back, said, hey, listen, if anybody's the faggot, it's him. He's walking 2 pugs. We're playing sports. That's it. So we have these situations where we have to deal with really stupid people, and it sucks. But our response can't be to perpetuate the argument. We have to elevate the conversation. And the only thing that we can do, the only thing that you guys can do effectively is to become a roadblock in the lives of everybody you come into contact with and show them who you are. Nobody ever changed their beliefs because they lost an argument or a debate. My beliefs weren't changed because I went and read a book about theology and how Sodom and Gomorrah wasn't really destroyed for this reason. It was destroyed because of this reason, though that did help me later on. I was changed because I met people and I got to see the image of God in them, the Imago Dei. I got to see that I really wasn't complete without them. And unless we're able to look at people and say the exact same thing, we've really missed the point. Our walk home, getting to that destination is great, but the walk itself is meant to be just as rewarding as the destination we're going to. We get to experience God in each other. How cool is that? And that includes, I got to censor myself so I don't cuss. That includes the real mean people. Now think of any horrible expletive you can come up with, and that's probably what I'm thinking. So we can't hold the other against the other. Nothing is an excuse to God, a worthy excuse to God, for us to hate another one of his children. We're telling them that we need to adopt that fully in ourselves as well. And I'm pointing the finger at myself because I sit back and I want to go off on Mark Driscoll when he says something publicly, or Pat Robertson, who just came out for evolution and said he believed in evolution. It's awesome. I was surprised. I was like, wow, I agree with Pat Robertson on something. This is incredible. Yeah. Yeah. You know, it's true. Anne Lamott has this quote that I love. She says, you can safely assume you've created God in your own image when he hates all the same people you do. Like, our version of God, our God that we have, whether we consider ourselves to be progressive and inclusive, or whether we're conservative Christians, our God is in a box. And part of the walk home and part of letting other people affect us and our faith and speak into our lives is to open up that box so our view of God becomes bigger. Anne Lamott hit the nail on the head. Anais Nin said, we don't see things as they are, we see them as we are. I think that's true, especially in faith. I saw the world through black and white lenses, and I missed the beauty of all the rainbows around me, and thank God I'm finally getting to see some amazing rainbows on shirts, people. The diversity that I'm seeing gives me such a greater appreciation for God. My God is so much bigger than he ever was before. Kierkegaard, I'm just going to throw some quotes because that's what I'm told speakers do. He had a slideshow. I didn't. I'm going to learn from that. Next time I'm going to have a slideshow. It'll keep me on topic. Kierkegaard, and this one has plagued me and kept me up at night thinking, so I hope it does the same thing to you. And it's a simple quote. Once you label me, you negate me. When we call somebody a fundy, even if that's true, we're negating them, and we're hypocrites. Um, that I think is the most important thing to remember. We're called to a higher standard. Especially those of us who know the kingdom of heaven is at hand. We've got all these beautiful heavenly people around us. The children of God are so much more vast than we've been taught. But we have to remember that the other that's persecuted us and hurt us, that thinks we have this crazy agenda where if I can get you to be gay, I get a toaster or something. By the way, the only time I was ever recruited for anything by a gay person was for softball. I say that in the book. That's the only time I've ever been recruited by a gay man. He was good looking too. Not burly enough for me, but he was good looking. And he drank Bud Light. Not so much. So we've heard these talks about the walk home that, as I said before, that as Carl said, God is home, that walking towards God, that's the walk. That's the shoe on the mountain. And then we've heard from Jared and his story that God is faithful and that heaven is looking for a home as well, and that when the two meet, there's this fantastic story that happens. And then we heard, obviously a million different aha moments. I couldn't succinctly put into Roland's talk in one phrase ever. So I think that the aha moment definition, an experience that inspires a reorganization of thought, being open to that reorganization of thought is the walk home. I love reorganizing thought. I love being, I used to think, I had all the answers. When I started being able to say, I don't know, that was a really amazing moment. And I've been getting a lot of questions lately that I don't know the answer to. And thankfully, those questions involve gays and lesbians, bisexuals, transgendered, intersex. And so when I say I don't know, I can also say, but I know some people who do. Maybe you should ask them. And that, to me, is what it means to be an ally. That, to me, is the walk that God has brought me on, where he, as Brennan Manning said, I was ambushed by Jesus. I had a Damascus moment. He shifted my walk from this direction to this direction. Thank him for it. The scenery is just so much better over here. And speaking of walking, I just got lost over here in this neighborhood a little while ago. And I'm soaking wet right now. And I was worried about my hair and things that I never worried about before my year as a gay man. And I keep asking people, where is this community center? And they're like, no, we don't know. And I'm like, you're just making fun of the American. I know that. The terminology I've heard over here is SEPO. That's mean. Don't ever call me a SEPO. Or a Yank, for that matter. Southerners take that very personally. What's the other one? Jag? Jago? Dag. Dago. Or dag. Dag. What is it with you guys putting O's on the end of everything, shortening it all and putting... Registration? Rego. Timo. Oh, that, I don't... Oh, okay. Yeah, that... Okay. Feel free. It's all on camera. Yeah, Muso. Muso. That was another one. I was like, just say musician. Are you that lazy? Too many shrimp on the bobby. I heard Jade made a comment about time saving. Okay, well I understand that. I can be lazy too. That would be awesome. I don't think I could do that though. I would love to have the accent, but I would get into way too much trouble here. The shorts the girls wear are just, oh my gosh. Now, thank God, I've got a friend, Kimmy, who is a childhood sweetheart of mine. I've got pictures in my bag if you want to see. She's coming to visit me for Valentine's Day in Seattle, and I'm absolutely stoked about it. Carl was talking to her with me on Skype. Carl was talking to her on Skype with me. I was trying to get his approval because I go to him for all my female needs. And that's because, yeah. I've seen his thigh. Did you guys know that Carl stays in his boxers on his days off? Like, while he writes his sermons, he's in his boxers. It's really hot. Steve is obviously the guy. No, I'm just playing in the relationship. But no, so we're on Skype with Kimmy and we're talking about me coming back over here, and Kimmy's like, oh, I want to come, and Carl's like, you need to come out here, and she's like, well, one of us has to have a regular job. A very wise thought for somebody, you know, she's thinking long term. And I'm like, oh, great, wow, that's cool. You know, she'll have a job, and I'll get to write and travel. That's awesome. And he says, well, you know, if he writes another few books, maybe on his 5th bestseller, you can retire and become a lady of leisure. Okay, so that's about as long as the dead silence we heard, at which point we're like, well, what's going on? And she's like, yeah, I bet Tim would like that. And then she said, did you say lady of pleasure? And I said, I'm going to become a member of Crave MCC in Sydney. Thank you. You're my wingman for life. I've said it before earlier. I'll say it again. The other impacts our story in such a beautiful way. We like to watch these romantic comedies and these movies because there's a beginning and a middle and an end. And the only thing that's set and sure for us is that we've got a beginning and an end. There's no clearly defined neat middle with story. If you study writing and the mechanics of story and the philosophy and theology of story, there's no neat middle. Life is messy. There's no way to get around it. My messy middle, or middle-esque moment in my early 20s, from 22 to 26 right now. I was standing on Darling Harbor on the bridge last night for the fireworks celebrating killing the Aborigines. It was awesome. And laser shows and everything. We've got the same kind of holiday. It's called Thanksgiving, National Rape and Genocide of the American Indians Day. But fantastic. The skyline was right there. The water was right there. These fireworks going off. Best fireworks show I've ever seen. You guys really go big or go home. It's awesome. And there are a lot of really amazing girls in shorts around. And Carl's there. And Matt's there making fun of me, as usual. And, yeah, it was awesome. And I'm standing there thinking, wow, God, you told me to question what I had been taught in the church and to attempt to debunk or kill my inner Pharisee on June, somewhere around 8th to the 10th, Tuesday, whatever the Tuesday was. I should know the exact date. It would help. In Nashville, Tennessee, in a dive bar that's been rated the 13th diviest dive bar in the U.S. They only serve beer. It's piss beer. It's $6 for a pitcher of it. So I'm in heaven when I'm there. Outside on a porch. It starts with a girl, as most stories do. You ladies will understand that. I love lesbians. They get me. And then 4.5 years later, I'm standing on a bridge in Sydney looking up at the fireworks, knowing that the next night I get to talk about the love of God and I get to talk about Ubuntu, and I am because you are with all of you. That is the coolest walk home ever. I could die tomorrow and I would walk home, finish that walk home. I would do it slowly because I'm a bigger dude. Roland has encouraged me to walk. I did that earlier. Walked around. And if you're obedient to it, and if you love your neighbor as yourself, and if you forgive those who are mean to you, and you look at them as yourself, and you know that they're all on a journey, that the Holy Spirit hasn't retired, that He's still actively working in their lives, and you forgive them, and you allow them to become a part of you, even if they're your oppressor, your walk is going to be so much better. And that's what's going to change stereotypes. That's what's going to change minds. That's the way that marriage equality is going to happen, and adoption and every other struggle that we have in this last kind of stronghold of the civil rights movement. That's what's going to change it. Not, I've got a better argument than you, I've got a better debate. I can organize a group of 10,000 to march on your church. Oh yeah, there's one last thing. I went and visited Westboro Baptist Church in December of my year. And the purpose of this was to see if I had truly killed my inner Pharisee. I didn't want to punch Shirley in the nose, Shirley Phelps Roper. I actually talked to her on the phone multiple times. She's a very cordial person to me on the phone, so I thought it was going to be a great experience. Within a minute and a half, they had seen my earrings and seen me and said that I was a child of Satan and that they were going to call the cops if I didn't leave. And I said, ooh, you've got your heads covered. That's really cool. You say you believe it, you're covering your heads. And they're like, you little shit, pardon me. And I'm like, oh, wait, oh, you're not such a literalist after all. So I'm walking away in the snow, and I walk down past the sign that says Westboro Baptist Church on it. And in red spray paint, I've got the picture, I'll show you. In red spray paint, somebody had come up and said, God hates the Phelps on their sign. I was like, show them suckers. And then I was like, wait, no, he doesn't. That's why he's God, and I'm me. And that's why my walk towards him, that process of sanctification is so important. Because Fred Phelps and Shirley Phelps Roper and all those crazy, loony dorks, God loves them every bit as much as he loves us. And that's pretty freaking cool. So, no matter who you meet, whether it be Fred Phelps and his crew, or whether it be somebody like, what's Bob Dagger? What's his name? Bob Dago? Catter. The Mad Catter. Put a big hat on him. Mad Catter. That's what I do. Whatever his name is. I'm not from Australia. I don't know these things. Yeah, no matter who it is, just love the hell out of them. Be the person. I don't use the Martin Luther King Jr. quote. Be the change you wish to see. No, but be the one that breaks the stereotypes for them. Show them that you're a human. Don't isolate yourself and separate yourself the way I was taught to separate myself. Be loud and proud and as loving as you possibly can be, and work with them where they're at, because that's grace. God does it for us. We're supposed to do it for other people. So I think I'm going to pray really quick. I've rambled on long enough. I'm going to pray, and then I guess he said Q&A. Yeah, because we've got about 20 minutes. So if any of you guys have any questions, then I'm here to answer them. So if you'll go before the throne with me. Father, I thank you so much for bringing these people into my life, and for letting me laugh with them and cry with them and learn from them and drink with them and eat with them and pray with them, and the fact that they would let me come up here, a 26-year-old kid from the South, and speak to them. Following Roland Croucher, Lord, make me as capable as he is one day. I just ask that you would give us a spirit of peace, of nonviolence, and of true inclusion, the type of inclusion that includes all of your children, whether they're nice or not so nice, whether they love us or they hate us, whether they worship with us or consider us to be abominations. And I ask that you help us to realize, as we take this walk home, that it's all about your son, it's all about you, and that we fit into this grand story, and it's not neat, but it's good. And Lord, I ask that you just help us to be mindful of that story and our role in it, and help us to not have a spirit of bitterness. Help us to heal. Renew us, Lord. Heal us, Lord, because we need it. We all have baggage. Help us to follow the sage wisdom that you gave your son, Desmond Tutu, the great arch. Help us to look at each other and see you and not to see what we hate. Help us to look into the mirror and see you and not see what we hate. Give us confidence in ourselves and who we are. Give us confidence in who you are, in your love for us that's steadfast, never changing, eternal. Meet us, Lord. Repent and come to us in a way you haven't in a very long time, and enter our lives as profoundly as you are able, which I'm sure is beyond anything I can comprehend. Lord, thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you for Australia. And thank you for Carl and Steve, who have become brothers over the past few days. Lord, bless and honor their ministry. Bring people to them. Bring about your healing through them. Use them as a conduit for your love. And help it to not be too long before I get to come back here and spend time with all of these beautiful people and Carl and Steve again. All these things we ask in the name of your beautiful Son. In your name we pray.